This week on The Big Show, one of the most influential film studios in motion picture history, Warner Brothers, is celebrating its 100th anniversary. They not only created some of Hollywood's greatest movies and film stars, but they were also pioneers behind the innovative technology that put them in the forefront as major players in Hollywood. We'll look back at the founders and the work they created over the past century. Plus, it's almost been 7 years since we lost one of the singular talents in the music industry, Prince Rogers Nelson. We'll remember the life and legacy of the Purple One with our special guest, Tanja Pegues. And in addition, we'll review the upcoming film, Renfield. Charles Kirkland, Jr. Lenita Cook joins us for that and all and more on episode 534. Keeping it real with FilmGordon. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon, and people are chiming in on "Let's Go." This is a silent thing. Don't be contributing anything. Welcome to the show. We have a huge show today. I remember last week when we were on, I was talking to Charles that the Warner Brothers is celebrating the 100th anniversary of that studio. And as I talked about it last week, and we'll talk about it a lot more in detail today, they've created some of my favorite films of all time, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. And we also will review Nicolas Cage's latest film, Renfield, which, as Denny Green once said, it was what I thought it was. Nicolas Cage. We'll have all of that coming up a little later on, but right now we're going to open up with my friend of 30 plus years. She looks great. I know I look old and decrepit, but she is.
Oh my God.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Well, now I didn't want to give you one of these hokey intros where I was talking about, she's seen 7,000 concerts. She's gone. I didn't want to do that. But I know that Tanja, I thought I was a huge Prince fan. And then Tanja introduced me to some real Prince fans, and she would be one of them. Tanja, I always hate bringing you on during this time of year when we're talking about another anniversary that Prince is not with us. I remember telling you the story that we were literally on the air doing a show that week. And the news broke in the middle of the show, and I was like, whoa, it just changed the entire tenor. And as I spoke with a colleague of ours, Rodney Fitzgerald, yesterday, he told me that it was just like yesterday, and that it's just such a huge void. First of all, talk about your experiences as somebody who has supported this man's work, I don't know, since around 1977, 78, 79 to now.
Yeah, 78. So I am one of the few people that can call themselves what is coined now a bookend. I went to his very first tour when he opened for Rick James at the Capitol Center. And I was at that 10 o'clock show at the Fox, which was his very, very last live performance.
Wow. And I remember you telling me about that show too. What do you remember about that show at the Fox?
I've talked briefly about this when I'm asked that question about concerts. And it's one of those things where details I can't recall. And I equate that to being so engulfed in the moment that it's one of those things that you can't recall, like the tiny, tiny details of that night. But one thing I can say that from all the years that I've seen him live, seen him perform, I remember telling Tracy Morrell, my best friend, it was something different about that night. And I said to her, we would never see him like this again. And not knowing that was going to be the last time I was going to see him live, period. It was just something different about that performance that I've never seen come from him.
Now, how many times you guesstimate you've seen Prince in concert?
Tim, you've asked me this question before.
Everybody hasn't watched all the episodes of our show, so we have to keep on pretending that I don't know some of these answers.
So yeah, so one day I'm gonna sit and really tally everything, because seeing Prince live wasn't a concert, but then there was also after shows. It's hard to say. I would say somewhere in the 30s, maybe 30, 40s, something like that.
That's still a lot, man. That's a
It's a
whole lot.
lot. It's a lot. But you got to think that's a low end for a lot of, and Tim, we're called Prince fams. We don't consider ourselves fans, because we are family. But there's people that surpass me multiple times over.
Yeah, but I don't know them, and I know you, so that's why we always have you on. So now let's go, because you saw that show. I think it was probably the week before his passing, right? So,
Yes.
and I remember you and I talked that day, didn't we? The day of his passing.
Yes, because you were one of the
Oh,
ones that called. My phone
right.
blew up that
Yeah,
day.
and I remember you and I were on social media that night when Jimmy Fallon had D'Angelo and what is it, Princess, the tribute band or the tribute group
Yes.
on performing Sometime They Snow in April. Man, it was such a heartbreaking sort of an experience of having to go through that. Now I know how it made me feel. How did that impact you that night of that loss 7 years ago?
It was like losing a family member. Because he has been a part of my life since I was a child, like since that first song, Soft and Wet. And, I always envisioned myself being that 80-year-old lady that's, with her walker, that's going to see Prince playing a lounge in Vegas, doing his Prince review behind a piano. I never thought that there would be a time in my life that he would not be a part of it.
So think about 7 years has gone past. We lost him when he was 57. So if he were around now, he'd be 64. And
Mhm.
this is only rhetorical because none of us know. But I think Prince, toward the end of his life, I would say around 2015 up until 2014, he was starting to sort of settle in as the true elder statesman that we saw him as, what he evolved to. Where do you think he would have actually gone? Because I don't, gone were the days, Tanja, of these wild concerts from back in the day, and it was more of what I think you saw at the Fox that night. Do you
Mhm.
think that's the direction that Prince would have eventually ended up, or the place he would have eventually ended up?
I think he would have gone more into telling the story of his life. And everything up to that he's done up to the period of his passing kind of showed that's where he was going. I mean, he started writing his memoirs. He designated Paisley Park as a museum. So I think he was at that point and stage of his life that he was kind of pushing back from the live shows. Um, and I think he would have started opening up more about his life, because it's always been such a mystery about, his inner workings, and what makes him tick, and his life story. He's always give you bits and pieces here and there, but you always had questions that were never answered, but he was starting to answer those questions. But I think he was on the path of, let me step back from performing live and doing these extravagant shows and just really settling down into my life and enjoying life and sharing what he had experienced during these years to really guide, I think, also musicians on the path of success, and how you don't have to do certain things to be successful. Just be yourself and be a true musician and hone your craft, and it will come to you.
Right. Now, Tanja, I heard you say earlier that you started becoming a family member back in 1978. So it's been 45 years. And I know this is like asking you what your favorite child is or who your favorite child is. What is the one moment that stands out in all the experiences that you've had following this man and his music and his life and his legacy, what one thing sticks out more than anything else?
Performance-wise,
No,
was
it doesn't have to be performance. It can be anything.
I think the one thing that stands out to me is the one time that we locked eyes.
Did you get pregnant, Tanja?
I did. My blood stopped flowing, like everything. I think my heart probably stopped for a second. And yeah, it was one of those moments. I was front and center, and this night I decided to wear, like, I had a sequence like baseball jacket on. That it was really dope. And I guess he thought it was dope too. So he noticed me in the crowd and like gestured, because he had a blazer on, but like gestured to my jacket. And I looked at him, and he had those stares that and we locked eyes, and I just could not breathe. I could not function. It was one of those moments that I'll never forget.
So
I do
go
miss the
ahead.
fact that I never got a chance to meet him, but that was one of those moments I would never forget.
I got you. So what is how do you commemorate this day? What do you guys do? Is there something that you already have planned? Is there an event that's happening in Minneapolis?
They are doing programming at Paisley Park this year. They're doing a live stream memorial as well, for people to share their thoughts about his journey in life, and just celebrating the life that he lived. They also are doing some kind of DJ party situation at Paisley Park as well. But that's just a day that a lot of people that I've spent time with, going to concerts, going to Paisley Park, we just seem to connect either social media wise, streaming wise. For me, I listen to Prince all day, but any given day, I'm gonna listen to something by him. And it's just a day of reflection for me, just to reflect of how lucky I am to have lived a life and had him present as a musician. I can't imagine my path within music without him being in it. And just being able to experience that. I feel for kids now, because they really don't have what we had with having him in our lives as far as a creative and a musician. But it's always an open opportunity for them to live. But that's something I always celebrate. It's just the fact that I'm grateful to have been present for him.
Tanja, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on. And, I'll be in touch, because when we get to that day, we always spend some time talking to one another. But thank you for coming through and sharing your recollections of one of my favorite artists. I have him number 3 behind Bob Marley and Stevie Wonder. So it's, number 3 is not bad. That's good company.
Yeah, that's good company, especially Stevie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, never mind. Don't we that's a different show. I would bring you back for that. But Tanja, thank you, and we will be in touch. And you always welcome. So we have to have you come on when we talk about some hip hop next time.
Yes, please do, and some house music. Bring me on for either one.
Absolutely. All right, you take care, Queen, and we'll talk soon.
All right, you too. Thank you, Tim.
Not a problem, Tanja. All right, and of course that is not just a friend of our show, but that's a good friend of mine, Tanja Pegues. We've known each other now for 30 years, so Yeah, Charles. So you got anything, man? On I don't know how big of a Prince fan you were, and is Lanita here? Did she leave us? Or she's
around?
I'm still here.
Lanita,
yeah. Well, I don't know if you forgot or because you wanted to talk about Prince, but you didn't introduce me, so I don't know whether I was supposed to be part of that conversation or just sitting around and enjoying the day. So
right. So pretty much for people at home, this is what we do all the time. I said at the top of the show, Charles Kirkland and Lanita Cook will be by to review these movies, which i.e. means that you on the show today, right? But watch this. Since I didn't do it before, First of all, I'd like to bring back a friend of the show and a woman who's at least on here twice a month, coming out of, I don't know what they call Kansas City. Is it Barbecue City? Is it Smoke City? I don't know what they call KC, but she is out of Kansas City, Missouri. It is the one, it is the only Lenita Cook. Okay, turn
Well,
it
hello.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always happy to be
Lenita,
here.
Lenita's she's not on 10 right now. She's on like 7.5 right now, but let's go. We're going to get her to 10 before the show is over. And also joining me today is my co-host, the one, the only Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's going on, man?
Man, I'm so glad to be here. Look, I don't know, but we didn't get to say this, but Dan Snyder sold the Redskins today.
Yeah, nobody
the
cares.
Commanders are gone.
Yeah, nobody cares. So anyway, we'll talk about that after the show. Thank you for that piece of trivia.
So I'm celebrating.
You're celebrating. All right. So having said that, and I apologize because normally as a rule, I would give you guys a cheat sheet, but I was literally spending the entire week watching my favorite films from Warner Brothers all week. So I have a huge list here and I would just watch one and then I'd be like, well, let me try the next one. So I got a chance to watch Once Upon a Time in America. I don't know if anybody's seen this movie. Lenita, have you seen Once Upon a Time in America?
Now, probably. Tell me what year it came out.
Or now.
I think she said probably, but probably is not going to be good enough. Once Upon a Time in America literally is a top 10 film all time. Gangster movie, 3 hours, 49-minute epic. Robert De Niro, James Woods, yes. Joe Pesci. It takes place over 1933 to 1968, so it's a 35-year saga. It is great, right? It's not Godfather great.
It's good, very good.
It's really good.
It's very good.
It actually could be Goodfellas good, because Goodfellas, Godfather, Once Upon a Time in America. You just put them in a bag and shake them up. Those are probably like the 3 best films from that genre that are made, but De Niro is in all three of those movies. How about that? Robert De Niro's in all 3 of those movies. And he's really, really good as Noodles in Once Upon a Time in America. So I watched that. I had an opportunity to watch The Wild Bunch, which I hadn't seen in years. My God, I love that movie, man. If The Wild Bunch were a woman, every time I see her, I'd be like, that's how good The Wild Bunch is. Have you guys seen The Wild Bunch?
Yes.
Lenita, have you seen The Wild Bunch?
Peck and Paul.
I don't think so.
Okay. Lenita, see me offline after the show so I can give you a list of what I call Tim's essentials that you should be watching. Sean Edwards should also have given you a list of essentials.
Now, I have seen Once Upon a Time in America. I have seen that one.
Okay. I'm just checking because, as they say in the drug game, as your movie critic, you got to get your movies up, man. You got to go in there and watch some of these classics, man. You got to get your movies up. All right, so let's go into this right now. Let's talk about Warner Brothers, man. This studio, which is celebrating 100 years, was founded in 1923 by 4 brothers, Harry, Albert, Sam, and the man who ran the studio, Jack Warner. The company established itself as a leader in the American film industry before diversifying into animation, television, and video games, and is one of the original Big 5 major American film studios, as well as a member of the MPA, Motion Picture Association. Now, Warner Brothers not only created some of the greatest movies and film stars, but they also were pioneers behind the innovative technology of the Vitaphone that synchronized sound and put them in the forefront as major players in Hollywood. There's so much that I could say about this film, man, but let's just say Warner Brothers has released a huge portfolio of diverse films that they have over 2,500 titles that they've put out in 100 years. Such titles as A Streetcar Named Desire with Marlon Brando, the original A Star is Born, Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean, Bonnie and Clyde, Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Blazing Saddles, of course, A Clockwork Orange, The Exorcist, Malcolm X, as well as the contemporary stuff they've done. Think The Matrix, Wonder Woman, Harry Potter, Batman. All that's Warner Brothers, and that's not even counting all of the classic titles like So Lanita, for instance, I was watching, I made this list and I was sharing with Charles. I made this huge list. And in the first, from 1923 to 1949, James Cagney made 28 films for Warner Brothers.
28.
28. Angels with Dirty Faces. The Public Enemy. I mean, like
Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Right. So think of it this way here. So as we keep talking about like Once Upon a Time in America, The Godfather, and Goodfellas, Warner Brothers is the foundation of those sorts of films. They made those films and had those stars, the James Cagneys, the George Raffs, the Edward G. Robinsons, the Humphrey Bogarts, all those dudes were at Warner Brothers.
And Betty Davis.
And Betty Davis at Warner Brothers. The other thing that I want people to remember, and I tell this story all the time because I think it's just the most hilarious thing ever. Humphrey Bogart on the roster was fourth string, right? So Warner Brothers had, of course, James Cagney was number one, Edward G. Robinson was number two, George Raff was number three. And then Bogart came. And Bogart was in movies, but he was never the star of the movie, right? And then through good fortune, bad judgment, whatever you want to call it, from George Raff, who was number three, George Raff passed on 3 movies in a row, Lanita. 3 in a row. And Bogart took all 3 of those movies and became not just a superstar, but an icon. What are those 3 movies, you would ask me, Charles Kirkland?
I already know, but go ahead. What are those 3 movies, Tim Gordon?
Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The Maltese Falcon, and Casablanca.
Yeah.
And he made those 3 movies in a row. Bang, bang, bang. First of all, looking in the camera, George Raff's family. What was he thinking? Why did you let Bogey do that? But I'm just telling you, man, Warner Brothers, man, so many classic films that came out of that studio, man. I named some of them, man. I have a list down here. Do you mind if I go through some of these movies, man? I just want to
go ahead. I mean, because you don't even mention Paul Money, who did the original Scarface.
Did you just call Paul Mooney. Paul Money?
Did I say Money?
Wow, that was good. I like
Paul Mooney, who did the original Scarface.
I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, The Life of Emile Zola, The Story of Louis Pasteur. We talked about Edward G. Robinson, Little Caesar, The Man with Two Faces, The Amazing Dr. Clitterhouse. You talk about Humphrey. Oh my God, Bogey, Maltese Falcon, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Casablanca, To Have and Have Not, The Big Sleep, Key Largo. Oh, that's Warner Brothers, and that's all in the 1940s. Yeah. Alone. That's not like that's spread out. That's one decade of Humphrey Bogart. Betty Davis, you talked about Petrified Forest, Now Voyager, Jezebel, The Man Who Came to Dinner. They had Gary Cooper, who did one of my favorite films, The Fountainhead. So this subject, as you can tell, is near and dear to me because I love classic film. And when you go back through the annals of classic film in Hollywood, Universal made a bunch, United Artists is responsible, but nobody has as many titles as Warner Brothers, man. Warner Brothers, man, my God. And to think that after all these years now, I was told yesterday they're $500 billion in debt.
What?
As of right now, 500 B in the red at Warner Brothers.
You know, the Commander sold for 6B.
Oh my God, man! Really, we talking about Warner Brothers. You can want to squeeze in.
I'm just trying to.
So Lanita Cook. Hold on a second. We go back to you, Lanita Cook. I know you didn't have a chance to study in advance, and I realize that I, as a film nerd, will go back and watch all these movies repeatedly. But think about you as a film critic right now, and all the work that you do, and this piece that we're talking about right now is about the foundation of filmmaking, the stars, the studio system, when the studios literally had all of these, not just stars under contract, but they had all these directors under talent. So, I mean, under contract and screenwriters under talent. So they would option books, man. And we can make this film. And there's just but I'm just saying that to say there's just so many stars that have come through the gates of Warner Brothers. By the way, which didn't burn down, but had 2 major fires inside the first 20 years of its history. I want to say one was 1943. The other one might have been 1934, 1936, circa somewhere in there. where huge parts of the studio lot were burnt down, man, and they had to keep rebuilding Warner Brothers. So yeah, I've just been immersed in this history, man, for about a week, getting prepared for our show today. So yes, Lenita, give me some background on one of the most storied studios in Hollywood history.
Well, so for me, I think that Warner Brothers defined, like you said, the studio system and those old Hollywood studio codes. I think this is one of the most important aspects of the industry. Now, Charles, I think you could probably speak on this better than I could, but I think this is kind of where Variety, right, was started. Variety magazine was started at the same time, and kind of keeping these codes in check, right? This is kind of the relationship that started. And so for me, I always look upon it like, oh, that's like really dope, because once you sign on with the studio, that then you have guaranteed work. But a lot of times these stars, like you said, stars and screenwriters, and they would get these contracts and their careers may be shelved, that the studio codes were very strict and strenuous. And so once that started to lax, I think going into the 70s and 80s, there was still kind of the spirit of the codes. Once you contracted with one studio, right, you kind of worked for them. All of your projects would be with them. But that's completely changed now. And so having been conditioned by that, I think as a film critic, I'm always very surprised when you see Samuel L. Jackson working for Disney and having projects come out for Warner Brothers, and and so it's very interesting how they've evolved. My question would be about that: which studio was the first to kind of lax those codes and say, hey, we need to think about structuring our contracts, structuring our relationships with our talent in a more would amicable be a good word, amicable way?
Well, I can answer that. The Hays Code, which I think initially was started, there were, if you go back and look through the history, there are some movies that either met the code because the code was very, about sex and language and all that activity. So the code is one thing, but the studio system and the breakup of the studio system is a second thing, right? So, the studio systems were back in the day were established that, like, say for Warner Brothers, they had control of the actors, they had control of the directors, they had control of the writers, and then they had control of the distribution means, which pretty much meant that they would make the film, and then they had theater chains that they owned and they would show their films in. So it used to be a one-stop shop. And over the time, I would say around the 50s, 60s, and going into the 70s is when all that sort of relaxed. But the interesting thing is that current day, you don't have situations, Charles, where you have a studio system for actors. So there's no actors that are bound to a particular studio. But directors have relationships with studios. Right. So Warner Brothers has had Clint Eastwood as a director. So if you look at all of the projects that Clint Eastwood distributes, they have been going through Warner Brothers since the 1950s.
Right.
Stanley Kubrick, before he died, had relationships with UA, and then starting in 1971 with Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, The Shining, all the way through Eyes Wide Shut, were all distributed by Warner Brothers. So the relationship with studios and directors is still a thing that's popular now. So you see Christopher Nolan, who will have done, I know some of these films.
I was going to say, how does that, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of it, though, is when a director works with a studio, there's a certain amount of creative license that they allow a director to have, because they know the person, the person has worked with them, they've worked with together on
right.
so many projects, that a director is, I mean, he's not beholden to stay with the theater, but with the studio. But because he's developed that relationship, he does.
Well, I'm not going to say, I wouldn't use the phrase creative license. I think when you're trying to get movies made in Hollywood, it's a lot easier going to somebody when not just when you have a good track record, but when they also have a relationship with you.
Right.
Right. So you still see to this day that there's certain people who work kind of with a studio like a Jon Favreau. If he's doing anything, he's doing it through Disney because not because his projects do make money, but they have a familiarity with him. So that part of the business has sort of evolved, Lanita, and changed. But actors, nah, we're no longer bound by a system or a code. I think the Motion Picture Association came out with a code probably like somewhere in the 60s that replaced the Hays Code.
Right.
So now we currently have PG, PG-13, NC-17, R. So that's kind of the modern way we look at films. And it's a lot relaxed now because films are, we have more cartoon violence, or we have more violence that folks are willing to accept. So society had to change in order for the business to change, the models of what we watch, how we consume. Like, for instance, somebody talked about John Wick a couple of days ago. I had a huge conversation about how violent John Wick was. What is John Wick rated? R?
R,
yeah. Pretty much. Back in the day, John Wick would be an NC-17, man. But, something to that effect. But yeah, man, it has changed a lot over the last 100 years.
And I didn't know if this happened any place else, but the first time where I saw on network television was on Supernatural, which was a CW show, where they could say SHIT and they could say BITCH on air, on network television. I had never seen that before. And then in watching that show, it's like, have we as a society changed, or is this something that the studio is pushing forward, or is it a symbiotic relationship where we're give and take and responding to each other?
Well, I think it definitely has been a change in society. I mean, you look at you think back to some of these films, and it's funny because to this day, if you watch The Jazz Singer, which is the first talkie that Warner Brothers had back in 1928, they will put a disclaimer on the front, like, pretty much saying, this is pretty racist, and we understand that it's racist, and we want you to know that we are not standing by this, but this is something that was made as a part of that time. And there was so many things that have evolved like that. I've jokingly said on the show, I watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, and when you see Mickey Rooney, it's Mr. What's his name? Mr. Yakamoto, or whatever his name is. It's so racist. So racist. So there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff to change. Or when you watch, I remember coming on here one time and saying I was watching the 1936 Showboat, and I wanted to throw my shoe through my television until I discovered it's my television, so I'm not going to ruin it out of anger. But yeah, man, I mean, a lot. I mean, I think that point that you're making right now, the question that you pose, Lanita, is a really good one, that you have to look at art in the period that the art is created, because there's so many things that James Cagney put on film in the 20s and 30s that would not fly today. No. You wouldn't have, the famous scene of mushing that grapefruit in a woman's face. Right. You wouldn't do that in 2023, but it worked in 1930 or whatever year it was, 1931, whatever. Yeah. So there's so much, man, about the game that's changed. But that's why it's important for us to do what we're doing right now, Lanita, which is pointing out not the fact that not just that they've had all these iconic films, but also to your point of how we've changed as an audience over the course of the last century by the innovations and these images that are indelibly burned into people's brains who watch films.
Let me ask you this. Can I ask you something?
Sure. Sure.
So for me, I think the golden age of, cinema in general, but definitely Warner Brothers, is going to be that late 70s going into the 80s. I am talking about when they're doing redoing DC properties, right? So they're taking it from your television sets and they're creating feature films, and they're giving you color and bold personality. They're giving you Prince, right? For your soundtrack, and then moving into the 90s with The Matrix and pushing technology, but then also how we think forward. I would not have ever imagined being so interested in Baudrillard, right? But a movie like The Matrix makes you wonder, what is simulacra? You know? And so the things that we think about, and so for me, that late 70s, 80s, and into the 90s is kind of the golden age of Warner Brothers for me.
So let me just drop this on you, Charles. 63 years ago, John Ford directed Sergeant Rutledge at Warner Brothers, right? Sergeant Rutledge, if you don't know, is a story of a sergeant who is being court-martialed. And of course, you know, the sergeant didn't do anything. African-American, played by the late great Woody Strode. So you had that film, and then before the decade ends, when they decided like to integrate directors, right? And we would have Black directors. So of course, Melvin Van Peebles, Ossie Davis, and Gordon Parks come along, right? Well, not come along in the studio system. The Learning Tree, which is one of the first films directed by a Black director, comes from Warner Brothers. 2 years later, Superfly comes from Warner Brothers. Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee comes out of Warner Brothers.
Why
is he doing that? Blazing Saddles, which Richard Pryor didn't get credit and wrote, comes out of Warner Brothers. So the studio may have been slow, because I think prior to 1960, I don't know of any film that Warner Brothers made that starred anybody brown. And by the way, Sidney Poitier was not under contract to Warner Brothers. He didn't make any of these Warner Brothers films. That was another studio that had Poitier, because we still had the studio system during that time. But to Lanita's point, man, I mean, you know, I think going back to your earlier question, when you talk about the evolution and the change, film has been used for a lot of stuff, right? Film, you know, back in 1977, because I know Lanita wasn't born yet, so she was probably too young for this. But when Roots revolutionized television,
sure, let's go with that.
That was huge, man. That was another step forward. That was something that the public had never seen. You know, of course, Melvin Van Peebles, several years earlier, makes you know, a political statement with Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. And then, you know, the studios look at that, and suddenly there's Shaft at one studio, there's Superfly over at Warner Brothers, Black Belt Jones. I mean, they fell into the pattern of saying, okay, this is hot, let us ride it out. So Warner Brothers continued to diversify their portfolio. And I'm not saying that these guys, you know, that their motives weren't about money, because it's always about the money, right? But yeah, it's a very different time, man, of looking at films, as I said earlier, from 100 years ago, from 50 years ago. Even if you think about films at the beginning of this century, when, you know, The Matrix drops, you know, we talked about all the innovations of Warner Brothers back in the 1920s. Think about the technological advancement that The Matrix represented for film. The first Matrix, like, when they were doing bullet time, who had seen that before?
Never seen before.
Who had seen bullet time before? I was like, oh, Warner Brothers, man. Warner Brothers. Charles, that's what you should have been going Warner Brothers, man.
Now you're doing it. You stopped me from doing it. Now you're doing it.
All right, so let me throw out Lanita a couple more of these films, man. Let's see. You got Purple Rain, of course. Blade Runner. Let me see. The Witches of Eastwick. Full Metal Jacket.
Come on now, not the Witches of Eastwick. I can't look at a cherry because of
what? Say that again. What did she say? All I heard is something about a cherry.
I can't even look at a cherry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I can't about that?
Yes, because of the Witches of Eastwick.
New Jack City, JFK, Malcolm X, Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, AI. Oh my God, man. AI, The Matrix, Eyes Wide Shut. So many movies. And then you take it to 2010s. Oh, I'm sorry. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Slumdog Millionaire, The Dark Knight, The Book of Eli, 127 Hours, The Town, J. Edgar. I mean, dude, I'm gonna stop. Creed, all these movies of today are all Warner Brothers. Joker, Judas and the Black Messiah, it's all Warner Brothers, man. So that is my studio of choice.
So what are
Go ahead.
what are all the properties that are under Warner Brothers? So we have HBO. What else do we have under Warner Brothers?
The Time Warner Group.
Yeah, well, you know, now it's no longer HBO Max. It's now Max.
Which I think is dumb because now people are going to say, what about Cinemax? Max?
Yeah,
Max?
it's simply called Max now, man. So, wait, hold on a second. Shane is, okay. Shane was making some hand gestures. I didn't know what he was doing. So, yeah, man. So there you go for Warner Brothers. So any lasting thoughts about this great studio that we celebrate that was founded on April 4th, 1923? No? Y'all are good? I love Lanita's face. Y'all good?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to hear you. I wanted to hear you say more about this. What'd you say? $500 billion debt? I wanted to hear you say more about
leave that debt alone, man, because you know that's not positive. It's just facts.
So he says that as a stockholder in another studio.
That's true. Which, by the way, that studio is not doing much better than Warner Brothers Discovery, because I looked at their stock yesterday and I looked at the stock that I own, and both of them in the same place. So until the movie business rebounds, man, and just hold on to your stock. It's all sentimentality, man. So having said that, man, I wanted to do a much longer thing for Warner Brothers, but the problem we were running into is the summer movie season starts in about 3 weeks, because I wanted to dedicate an entire show to talking about the different eras of Warner Brothers, because there's so much there. But today we just kind of did a scratch the surface introductory kind of look at this major studio. And if you want to know what films they had, just Google Warner Brothers through the decades, man, and all these titles will just pop up. And just, you know, we tell you, see something good at the movies every week. You can spend a long time watching a lot of movies at Warner Brothers. You'll be good to go.
100 years.
Yeah, I think if you Google Warner 100, they have a site dedicated
I have
to
a site, and I saw those movies. I saw those movies, and I was like, I'm gonna make my own list of movies. So here we go. I can't ask either of you, because neither of you know what would be your favorite film at the studio, because there's so many, man. Wow. My God, man. Or your favorite actor out of the studio. That's hard too.
Well, not really. I've always
been. You mean out of Warner Brothers?
So I mean, Bogey is the man. I mean, Bogey, Humphrey Bogart, man. You can't go wrong with Humphrey Bogart. Clint Eastwood, man. The Sergio Leone stuff, man.
The Matrix. The Matrix is my favorite.
That's your favorite?
It's just one film, though. I mean, you can't go into 2 and 3 or 4. But The Matrix, the first one, is an excellent. The
first one is groundbreaking,
excellent
man. It really is. AI, man, with George Kubrick, the films that he made in Warner Brothers, man. Wow, there's so many good stories. I actually was on the phone yesterday, Lanita, with one of my closest football friends, whose father worked at Warner Brothers for 40 years.
Really?
So he always regales me with like these amazing stories of these people, and then, you know, we both have the same book. I have a book at home written by David Thompson called Warner Brothers. So I was reading a book this week. 200 pages, man, but it is chock full of so many facts about the studio, man, and the inner workings of what Jack Warner created. And you know,
see how he preps for the show, and he doesn't even tell us anything. He just says, "Yo, we're gonna do this in like 5 minutes."
Okay. So Lanita, see, Charles, we always have this conversation, right? And Charles has literally sat on set with me and watch me do this without having anything except my memory. Is that correct?
Most of the time, yes.
Yeah, so it's not like I got something in front of me right now. I'm just reading. I'm just kind of like going off the top of my head of stuff I've seen, because I watch tons of stuff. So it is what it is, man. It's a gift and a curse, man. What you want from me?
Yeah.
All right, Lanita. So we got
for me, like the classics are from my girlhood, and probably stuff that I watched with my parents, like their interests. And so for me, it's the 80s, the 90s, on up that I can just really get into and talk about off the dome.
Charles, you little baby, you know, we gotta get your film up.
Oh, don't do
Get your
that.
cinema up, girl. I need you watching The Public Enemy. We're gonna bring him home. Ma, he's coming home. And then you get a knock on the door and you open the door, you see that famous picture, that famous shot of James Cagney all wrapped up and just falling face first. Well, that was The Public Enemy, right?
That was.
Yeah. White Heat. Ma, top of the world. Boom. Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh my God, man! I'm just here as a film nerd, man. I didn't get this grade, man. Just not sitting in the theater, man. I was watching movies. All right. So having said that, we got about 13 minutes left in the show. We got one movie to review this week. It's just one. They're actually more than one out, but folks are kind of lazy getting movies to us. So if we don't see it, we can't review it.
Can't talk about it.
Somebody said this morning, if I get you this movie this morning, it's going to be on your show, right? I was like, sure. And then I never got the movie.
Never got it.
Hence, it's not on the show. So, Lanita, you gotta understand this happens to us a lot, right? So we just kind of soldier through. But this week, we're going to review a movie, as I said at the top of the show. There are certain actors who, when they have projects coming out, I get excited, man, because I know this is either going to work or it's going to be a disaster. But either way, it's going to be fun to watch. And this week on the show, wow, my man Nicolas Cage is back. Now, Nicolas Cage, for the most part, Charles, I think has been what I call a film festival actor. Like, I've seen so much of his stuff at film festivals or straight to streaming, because he's not the Nicolas Cage that we remember back in the day.
Right.
But man, when they told me about Renfield, I was like, okay.
Feld.
I thought it was Renfield.
Renfield.
It's spelled F-I-E-L-D.
Feld.
So we felled instead of feeling?
Correct.
Okay, cool. All right. Charles said it's Renfield, so okay. Dracula.
Are you sure?
Hey, I thought it was Renfield too, but Charles said
Okay.
it's so no. We're gonna do it Charles's way, because if it comes back crappy, I'm gonna be like, it was Charles's way.
Okay.
Dracula's lackey, R.M. Renfield, finds a new lease on life in modern-day New Orleans when he falls in love with Rebecca Quincy, a traffic cop, and decides to finally stand up to his creator in hopes of finally breaking free of his servitude in the supernatural horror film Renfield.
Okay.
How's that? Directed and produced by Chris McKay and written by Ryan Ridley from a story by Robert Kirkman, the film features characters from the 1897 novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. The film stars Nicholas Hoult as the title character. Nicolas Cage as Dracula. Aquafina, Ben Schwartz, Adrian Martinez, and I'm not going to butcher this woman's name in supporting roles. All right.
Sure. I'm not going to
Go ahead, man. Try that. All right. So before we get to my good friend Lanita Cook, did you see this movie, by the way?
I did.
Wow. I don't know what that means, but I will say that you're going to go second for that. I will lead off by saying that Charles Kirkland and I sat next to each other, and I'm
holding hands.
We were not holding hands, but I sat there because I want honest reaction. So always, when I watch movies like this, I surround myself with colleagues. And I thought, for the most part, them modernizing this story of him sitting in a support group of people who feel minimized in their lives and feel like they're in toxic relationships actually works well for the setup of the story, right? I thought that the character of Dracula, which was played by Nicolas Cage, to me is the best part of the film, because Nicolas Cage is such a scene eater that he has so much fun in the makeup playing this role. I thought Nicholas Holt's character was good. I just thought that the whole relationship part of the film doesn't necessarily work for me. Like him liking this woman and in the middle of all of this mayhem, and she trying to stand up because somebody murdered her father and all. That part of the movie was my least favorite part of the movie, which they could have left out and just had her pursuing Dracula or pursuing this crime family. I thought the movie overall was okay. I mean, I laughed in moments, and like I said, I thought Cage was great. I had to give it a grade, man. I just feel like, to me, there's something missing about the story, and I can't put my finger on what's missing. But because it was missing, it's either a C plus or a B minus to me. It feels like Cage is good. It feels like it has all the good action. Some of the action, I think, or some of the violence or gore is over the top. But I thought for the most part, the film works, because, and I left out the part, which before I throw it to Lanita, I left out the part that Dracula's assistant, Renfield or whatever his name, how you pronounce it, in order to have Dracula's powers, if there's an insect around or a bug that he can eat, then he gets the powers, which creates a dynamic that was interesting for the film. I thought a little over the top, but that's just me. But yeah, like I said, a C plus or B minus for Renfield. I enjoyed it, but if you ask me again in August about this movie, I'm not going to remember this movie. I'm just being real with you. I'm not going to remember it. So, Lanita, you gave the most interesting hello before a movie review I've ever heard. What did you think about this film?
Well, I have to say, when I saw the trailer of it, I was completely in. Like, my heart was thumping for, I cannot wait. The excitement is built. I will say, when I was younger, I did not like Nicolas Cage as an actor. And then he grew on me, and now he's one of my favorite actors. And I've been telling everybody, I don't think that we talked enough about the unbearable weight of massive talent. I don't think that we talked enough kind of overall about this movie. And we certainly didn't talk enough about Pig. And so I think that he is, like you said, re-emerging as an actor. And so I think this role is him returning to form. But it's supposed to be a Nicholas Holt's movie as the title character, and I really like him too. He's the guy from Warm Bodies, right? Mm-hmm. I really have appreciated him. He played Beast, right? Like, yes. I like this cat. Like, he's cat. So I said, okay, I'm gonna really love this. The visuals, the darkness meshed with the color. I thought, okay, this is going to be really interesting. What I will say is, generally, I thought it was a good time. I thought, I really, like you said, loved the fact that we explored this relationship of codependency through the connection that Maine has with their familiar. And so I think that was a very interesting entry point into talking about this universal dynamic, right? We're in this codependent thing. And so generally, I loved it, but then there were some parts where the excitement that I had for the movie was bigger than what they delivered.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, Charles Kirkland, are you writing a review for this movie?
I am writing a review for this movie.
Because we only got 4 minutes left, so I don't know if you have enough time. So we have to get
saying, like, real quick. When we came out of the film, I said it was wickedly fun. I really had a good time. And
did you say wickedly fun?
Wickedly fun, yes.
You are such a quote machine.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I think Lanita is correct. Some of the storyline did work for me. I enjoyed the codependency, which was the basis of Renfield liking the officer or whatever. That there's an issue there that he aspired to because she was stood up to the oppressor. So honestly, as we go through the film, we talked before about the codes and how some things are NC-17 that nowadays nowadays are R that would have been. This movie is very violent and gory. and over the top sometimes. I was like, this is a little ridiculous. But I think that was kind of the spirit of the film, where it wasn't supposed to be taken too seriously. And so, yeah, I enjoyed the film a lot. It was crazy to me how much they got him to look like Bela Lugosi in the very beginning of the film. When we first look at him, I was like, and I swear that first shot they show us is of Bela Lugosi. I have to go back and look at it again. But he looks a lot like that original Dracula, which I thought was awesome. So, I enjoyed the film. It was, I would give it a C+. Yeah.
Lanita didn't give us a grade.
Well, I'm going to say this. I really appreciate horror humor blend, but I agree with you that the violence was like, why?
Right.
So I will go with a B minus.
Damn. Okay. Making up our own ratings today. That's pretty good. All right. Okay. So we got about 2 minutes left in the show. And trying to think. Nobody in here watches Snowfall with me. So the final episode of Snowfall is next week. We may have Eamon Joseph come on the show because I wanted somebody from Snowfall to talk about that show. The mighty Miss the what is it called?
The Marvelous
Mrs. Maisel is dropping for people this week, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen the whole series already. I'm trying to think what else is coming out that's dropping. Wu-Tang ended last week. I'm trying to think.
Well,
go ahead.
Are you talking about mid-season stuff at all? Because you got Ted Lasso
Abbott Elementary's
heading
back
into mid-season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just trying to think if there are any shows that are ending that we need to talk about.
Oh, okay. So you said Elementary, the Sherlock Holmes?
No, I said Abbott Elementary is back and doing their thing. So we'll be back with more television. I was just trying to figure out, since we had a minute to go, if there's anything I needed to spotlight on the way out. But I really am looking forward to the end of Snowfall.
The Night Agent is on.
Yeah. Beef, if you didn't get a chance last week. I finally watched all of Beef. Beef is Beef is really good. Yes, Lanita?
So can you tell it to me in 30 seconds? I have felt averse to watching Snowfall because it's blackness and drugs.
All right, wait a minute. To be continued. I'm going to have you back on the show next week because we're going to talk about Snowfall. We got about 30 seconds. On behalf of my wonderful friend in Kansas City, the Lanita Cook, who I'm going to call off camera because she's been a 7.5 the whole show, Charles Kirkland Jr., I am Tim Gordon. As we tell you guys in closing every week, please watch something good at the movies. Until next week, we're out. You guys take care and enjoy your weekend. Peace.